I'm 29 years old and married to my 34-year-old husband, Jake. We've been together for 8 years and have a 6-year-old son. Jake has always handled our finances, so I trusted him with that because he seemed to have a good grip on our financial situation, and I was more focused on my family and career. However, after I discovered that I had been falsely accused, my husband and sister-in-law claimed I had been unfaithful to divert attention from their $100,000 scheme. Now they're extremely worried. I never questioned Megan's story because I wanted to be supportive after what she described as a messy breakup with her partner, Tom. I was more concerned with making sure she felt comfortable and welcomed in our home, and I worked hard to help her recover from what I believed was an emotionally difficult situation. However, what happened at my pregnancy announcement party completely changed my perspective. We had gathered close family and friends to share the news of our new baby, and the house was filled with laughter. As I stood in the living room, ready to make the announcement, Jake and Megan exchanged a look that I didn't fully understand at the time. I dismissed it, assuming they were simply excited or nervous about the news. But as I began to share our big news, the atmosphere shifted. I had spent days planning this event, making sure every detail was perfect, from the decorations to the food. It was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of our lives, a memory we could look back on with joy. The moment moved forward, and the room went silent as they suddenly interrupted me. Jake and Megan approached me out of the blue and began asking, "How could you do this?" For a moment, I laughed because I thought it was a joke, but after a while, the reality hit me hard. They said they had proof, something undeniable, that I had betrayed Jake and our family. My heart raced as they laid out their claims. Jake and Megan sounded so convincing and definite that I think everyone assumed I was guilty. I stood there frozen, trying to process what was happening, constantly looking at their faces for any hint that this wasn't real. It was like a bad dream, surreal and frightening. They were either saying incoherent things or nothing at all, and I was completely lost. The guests were stunned. Their expressions changed from joy to confusion and disbelief. It wasn't just the shock of the accusations. It was the way they were delivered. So cold and deliberate, and the more they talked, the more isolated I felt. They had planned this and rehearsed it, and now they were carrying it out in front of my friends and family. How could they accuse me of something so serious without any evidence? What was the purpose? The more I questioned, the more they doubled down, as if my hurt and confusion were somehow confirmation of guilt. When Jake finished, he stormed out of the room, leaving stunned silence behind. I just stood there, heart pounding, trying to understand what had just happened. The guests, clearly uncomfortable and unsure of what to do, began whispering among themselves. It must have been so awkward for them to be caught in the middle of such a personal and public confrontation. Slowly, one by one, they started to leave, offering awkward glances and hesitant goodbyes. I couldn't blame them. I wanted to ask Megan what all of this was about and demand an explanation, but before I could gather my thoughts, she left with her mother without even glancing back at me. I felt completely abandoned. The walls of the house that had felt like a home just moments before now felt cold and suffocating. I couldn't stay there another second. With tears streaming down my face, I quickly packed a bag, picked up my son, and drove aimlessly until I arrived at a small hotel on the outskirts of town. It was far enough from everything that I could breathe again, but close enough that I could still feel the weight of what had happened. I checked in under a different name to keep a low profile. I didn't want to face anyone, friends, family, or otherwise, because they all believed I had done something I hadn't, and I had no way to defend myself. The next day, as I sat in the hotel room trying to stay strong for my son, there was a knock at the door, and there they were, Jake and Megan. Somehow they had found me. It must have been through my father, the only one who knew where I was. Before I could even process how they'd found me, they began talking about the events of the previous evening. The more they spoke, the more unbelievable and upsetting their justifications became. They claimed they never intended for it to go that far, that it was meant as a joke, or some twisted way to test my loyalty. They said it was all a prank, that they had humiliated me in front of everyone we knew and turned my world upside down for amusement. They expected me to treat it like some harmless misunderstanding. But as they kept pleading for forgiveness, something inside me shifted. I had already begun reviewing our finances in preparation for the baby, and what I had uncovered in the days following the party made everything clearer. A significant portion of our savings was missing. Not a small amount either. Tens of thousands of dollars. Our credit card balances had skyrocketed, which was out of character for us. I asked Jake about it and requested the credit card statements, but he became defensive. Instead of explaining, he deflected and made me question my concerns. I let it go at the time, but it didn't sit right with me. What made it worse was that Megan approached me shortly after, implying that I should trust Jake completely. It was strange, almost like she knew I had questioned him and wanted to reinforce his story. All of this unsettled me, so I began combing through our financial records. That's when I found something troubling. Jake had been transferring money to Megan. These weren't small or casual payments. They were significant, and they lined up with the time Megan supposedly moved in after her breakup. It became clear that her story was just a cover. Jake had always handled our finances, and I had implicitly trusted him. But now it was obvious he had been hiding serious information from me. As I continued piecing things together, it all started to align. The missing money, the unpaid balances, Megan's sudden appearance, none of it was coincidental. Megan hadn't just needed a place to stay. She was hiding from the consequences of her actions. The money Jake was sending her was part of a much larger cover-up related to financial wrongdoing involving her business with Tom. Jake and Megan had invented a story to distract me from the real issue. Their so-called prank was not only cruel, but also a tactic to redirect attention away from their activities. When they showed up at the hotel and pleaded for forgiveness, I realized they weren't afraid of losing me. They were terrified that I had discovered everything. I laid it all out for them, how I had uncovered Megan's falsehoods, how I knew about the money transfers, and how their fabricated narrative had only emphasized how deeply they had betrayed me. I told them I planned to tell everyone the truth, our family, our friends, and that I would also inform the authorities. This wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, betrayal, and manipulation. They broke down and begged me to reconsider, but I no longer felt any sympathy. Jake had called me disloyal in front of everyone, and now he had to live with the truth being known. After enduring their excuses for long enough, I eventually asked hotel security to escort them out. As Jake left, he turned to me and said, "I know I made a mistake, and I'm sorry, but if you go through with this, you'll be damaging our son's and unborn child's lives." That sentence stuck with me. I'm trying to stay strong, but I keep thinking about the impact this will have. I now wonder, should I go forward with exposing Jake and Megan, knowing it might end in divorce and break our family apart? Our kids might grow up with divided parents, and everything we've built to fall apart. I'm asking for advice. Am I wrong for wanting to tell the truth after what they did? Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I want to start by saying thank you for your generous comments. I also saw some questions, so I'll try to answer them all. Many people wanted to know exactly what was going on between my husband and my sister-in-law. To be honest, I didn't fully understand either until a few days ago. To get the full picture, I reached out to Tom, Megan's former partner. At first, he was hesitant to talk, but after I shared my experience, he opened up. The misconduct I uncovered was a complex web of financial fraud and deception that had been going on for months right under my nose. Megan and Jake had been siphoning money from the business Megan co-owned with Tom. They started small, but over time, the transfers grew bolder. When Tom began noticing discrepancies, Megan panicked. Rather than taking responsibility, she turned to Jake, who, trying to protect his sister, chose to help cover it up. Jake's involvement was significant. Over $100,000 had been funneled from Tom's business and moved through our accounts. Jake, who had control of our finances, was able to conceal the transactions and create an intricate paper trail to throw off suspicion. To cover for Megan, they built a fictional story about her emotional breakdown and need for family support to explain her sudden move-in. As I pieced together the timeline, I realized they had grown more desperate as my interest in our finances grew. Tom had begun threatening legal action, and the pressure was mounting on both Jake and Megan. Now, everything makes sense, but not in the way I had hoped. Their prank at my pregnancy announcement party was a desperate attempt to divert attention, hoping that by making a scene and putting me on the defensive, they would buy themselves more time to cover their tracks. It was a cruel and calculated move, using what should have been one of the most joyful moments of my life. The more I learned, the more I understood how deeply they had middled me, our families, Tom, and everyone else around us. They had violated my trust, used our home as a base for their unlawful activities, and potentially risked our future and the future of our unborn child. This wasn't just a case of poor judgment or a brief moral lapse. It was a well-planned campaign of deceit and manipulation that had been going on for quite some time. After much consideration and reading your advice, I concluded that what Jake and Megan did to me at my pregnancy announcement party was inexcusable. They betrayed my trust, used our finances to conceal their wrongdoing, and then chose to embarrass me in front of our loved ones. For the better part of a year, the two people I trusted the most in the world had been leading double lives, maintaining a facade of normalcy while engaging in dishonest behavior behind the scenes. To simply forgive them without any consequences would only encourage them to continue doing whatever they wanted, believing there would be no accountability. So I've decided to tell Jake and my family everything they need to know about what's happened here and how much it has impacted me. I know it will be a difficult conversation, but I can't carry this burden any longer. They need to be held responsible for their actions. I'll update you all as soon as that happens. It was especially hard, considering that the last time they had seen me, I had been accused of infidelity. The rumors had spread quickly, and many of them even believed I was expecting a child with someone else. Convincing them to meet was a challenging task, but I knew I had to do it. Thank you all for your patience and support. I finally did what I said I would. I gathered our friends and family to expose Jake and Megan's deception. It would challenge everything they thought they knew. There was a lot of awkwardness and skepticism, but eventually they agreed to listen to me. When everyone had finally gathered, the tension in the room was palpable, and I could see the mixture of curiosity and doubt in their eyes. But I was resolute. I took a deep breath and began at the beginning, outlining the timeline of the events that had led to this moment. The room fell silent as I explained how I had been reviewing our finances, discovering the missing money, and how Jake had reacted so defensively when I questioned him about it. I explained how Megan had attempted to convince me that I was doubting a husband who was beyond reproach. However, I knew that my words alone would not be enough to convince everyone, especially given the accusations made against me, so I came prepared with evidence. Bank statements, credit card records, and all the documentation I had carefully gathered. I presented them to everyone, showing the pattern of transactions where Jake had been transferring money to Megan to help conceal her misappropriation. Then I introduced my most compelling piece of evidence, Tom. During our last conversation, he had offered to testify on my behalf. He was respected and even admired by my in-laws, and I knew his words would carry weight. As he explained how Megan and Jake had been misusing company funds regularly, the disbelief in the room was overwhelming. My mother-in-law's face turned pale as the reality sank in, and my father-in-law shook his head in disbelief. I finally addressed the issue of the cheating accusations Jake and Megan had thrown at me during the pregnancy announcement party. They later said it was a prank, but I made it clear that I had no solid proof to present in my defense. I looked each of them in the eye and told them they were welcome to check my phone and laptop if they needed reassurance that I had nothing to hide. None of them had ever imagined that the two people they loved and trusted had been dishonest with them for so long. My mother-in-law appeared heartbroken, trying to reconcile the image of her children with the reality of what they had done. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was visibly upset. His hands clenched as he listened to Tom describe how Jake and Megan had misused company resources and misled everyone around them. For what felt like an eternity, the room remained silent, and I could see the shock written on everyone's faces, especially my in-laws. I knew it was a lot to process. Their world had just been turned upside down. My parents, who had distanced themselves from me and initially believed the rumors, were now overwhelmed with remorse. My mother's voice quivered as she repeatedly apologized, saying how sorry she was for doubting me and how deeply ashamed she felt. My father, usually reserved, looked at me with tears in his eyes and kept saying he had let me down. As the realization spread, more relatives shared details about Megan. One cousin told me that Megan had borrowed money from her, saying she was in a difficult place after her breakup with Tom. She never repaid the loan, and whenever the subject came up, Megan would begin to cry about her past relationship, making everyone feel sorry for her and move on. Another relative told a similar story, and it became clear that Megan had been manipulating people for quite some time. By the end, the room was a mixture of shock, frustration, and disbelief. My parents were filled with guilt for not standing by me when I needed them the most, and even though Jake and Megan weren't present, their absence said everything. The betrayal ran deep, and the consequences were just beginning, but I knew I had done the right thing. Jake and Megan had misled everyone for far too long, thinking they would never be exposed. This was no longer about keeping up appearances. It was about ensuring accountability. I'm sure Jake and Megan will be upset when they find out about this, but I can't carry this burden anymore. For now, I'm relieved that my family knows the truth, and I promise you all that you'll be the first to know when there's an update. Update 3. After everything that happened, my parents asked me to stay with them. They said it was because they didn't want to miss the chance to support me and care for my son and unborn child. But I know part of it was because they felt remorse for not believing me. I accepted their offer, and it's been comforting to be home, especially during pregnancy. It's been a while since my last post, and a lot has occurred. Even with some peace here, Jake and Megan have continued reaching out for very different reasons. Jake has been on a continuous apology tour since the truth came out. When he first found out that I had exposed everything, he was upset, but quickly switched back to expressing regret. Being in a stable environment with people who truly care about me has been a huge relief, even if it's only temporary. He keeps saying he wants to see our son, and I know I probably should let them meet, but honestly, I just don't have the emotional strength right now. The events of the past several days have worn me down mentally and physically. I've explained this to Jake, but he seems to think I'm deliberately avoiding him. Maybe I am, but can you blame me? He's tried to visit multiple times, but I've asked my parents to keep him away for now. I just can't handle it yet. Every time I think about the lies, the accusations, and how easily he could have turned my life upside down, I feel sick. And yet, I still wonder if there's any chance for us to move forward, not as a couple, but at least as co-parents. Megan, however, has been extremely difficult. Ever since the family was told, she has been sending me messages and voicemails filled with emotional outbursts. As much as I try to shield my son from all this drama, I can't deny that it's affected him. He was present when Jake and Megan confronted me at the announcement party, so he knows something is wrong. I suspect that some relatives told her everything, especially the part involving Tom. She's angry about that. But what did she expect? They gave me no choice but to defend myself, even if that meant revealing uncomfortable truths. I've been telling my son that Jake is away on a work trip and will be back soon, but I know that explanation won't last forever. I don't want to portray Jake negatively, especially not in front of our son. He doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle, and I want to protect him from the full truth for as long as I can. Still, it breaks my heart every time he asks why his dad isn't here. He already knows his father, and if I move forward with the divorce, our unborn child may never get the chance. That thought is painful, and I'm torn between walking away from this toxic situation and fearing what that means for my children. Because of everything Jake has done, I don't trust him. Every time I think about our future, all I see is the hurt he's caused. The idea of raising 2 kids alone scares me. I don't want to be with Jake anymore, but I also fear making a decision I might regret. Divorce seems like the most logical step, but I can't help but worry about how it'll affect my children. At the end of the day, I know I need to choose what's best for me and my kids. Jake's actions aren't something I can overlook, and Megan's behavior only reinforces that. I'm taking it one day at a time and focusing on the positive. Being home with my parents, knowing I'm doing everything I can to protect my family, has kept me grounded. I'm still figuring things out, but I truly appreciate having a community that understands and supports me. I'll continue to update you all. Until then, I'm taking it step by step and hoping to stay strong for my family. I read your comments, and thanks to your help, I've decided to proceed with the divorce. A few days ago, I invited Jake over to see our son. It was the first time we'd seen each other since everything happened, and I knew it was time to tell him. So I did. When I told him about the divorce, he reacted the way he always does. I made it clear that the divorce was moving forward, but I also assured him that he'd still be able to spend time with our son regularly. As for Megan, I informed her through family that if she continues to contact me in a disruptive way, this could easily